Okay, so today's lesson is 9-3, and we're going to be finding and estimating square roots. A little bit of definitions, terminology that I want to go through today. Now, this symbol right here is the square root symbol. You might also hear teachers talk about it as a radical symbol. Okay, so that's the square root or radical symbol. When you have like square root of 16, that's a positive or a principal square root. And then when you have a negative on the outside of a square root symbol, then that would be considered the negative square root, in this case of 16. Okay, so a little bit of terminology there. Then we're going to go through and we're going to do some examples of finding square root. Okay, what is the square root of 64? And square root is two numbers that multiply together to give me 64 that are the same numbers. So 8 times 8, that's 64. Okay, the negative sign is on the outside of our square root symbol, so we're going to keep it. And then you say, what's the square root of 100? Well, 10 times 10 is 100. Okay, right here there's a plus and minus sign. We keep that. So answer can either be positive or negative. And then you take the square root of 9, and then you take the square root of 16. So if it's a fraction, you can just make two separate square roots. So it's going to be plus or minus. What's the square root of 9? 3. What's the square root of 16? 4. Okay, and the last one, we have a plus and minus symbol here, but what's the square root of 0? It's just 0. Is 0 either positive or negative? It's not, so we don't include that. Okay, and then letter E. Notice that this negative sign is inside of the square root symbol, and that is not possible. You can never take the square root of a negative number, because there's no two numbers that you can ever multiply together that are the exact same numbers that'll give you a negative answer. So this is not possible. So you cannot do that problem. Okay, so that is our examples, A through E. Now we're going to go and we're going to talk about rational numbers. Okay, rational numbers are numbers that can make perfect squares. Those would be rational. They have an ending point, right? They're terminating. So what's the square root of 100? The square root of 100 is 10. It's a perfect square. It's rational. Okay, now this one is 0.36, so we're going to keep our plus or minus. What's the square root of 36? It's 6. Most of us know that, but this is 0.36. So if I take 6 times 6, I get 36. But I don't want 36, I want a 0.36. So that means I have to put two decimals in here, because when I multiply it, I have to move my decimal place over 1, 2. That's how I got 0.36. So it's this plus or minus 0.6. That's our answer for that one. And then the next one, we take the square root of 16, and we take the square root of 121. Square root of 16 is 4. The square root of 121 is 11. And that's my answer for the square root of 16 over the square root of 121. Okay, now let's look at irrational. Irrationals are not perfect squares. So in order to find out the square root of 10, I can't do it. I don't know what it is, because there's no two numbers that multiply together to give me 10. I'd have to use a calculator or a chart to do that. And so I would say this is an estimated answer. That's what this symbol means. It's not an equal sign, it's an estimation sign. And I did the calculator, and it was 3.1627766. So not a perfect square, it's an irrational square root. Okay, this one here. Well, the square root of 1 is 1, but is there a perfect square of 7? And there's not, so this is going to be an approximate answer. Well, the square root of 1 is 1. That's a specific answer, but our bottom, the square root of 7, is 0.37796443. Okay, so it's irrational. It does not terminate. It keeps going on. And okay? All right, now the next part. We are going to estimate. And in order for us to estimate square roots, we need to kind of know what perfect squares are. So we're going to go through here and make a chart of our perfect squares that we know up to 144, and we'll see if we can go a little bit farther than that. Okay, so now, what's the square root of 0? 0. What's the square root of 1? 1. What's the square root of 4? 2. What's the square root of 9? 3. What's the square root of 16? 4. So the next one you think is going to be 5, right? Square root of 25? 5. Square root of 36? 6. The square root of 49? 7. The square root of 64? 8. 8 times 8 is 64. Square root of 81? 9. 9 times 9 is 81. Square root of 100 is 10. Square root of 121, 11. Square root of 144, 12. Now my next one would be 13. And 13 times 13 is 169. And then I could do 14. 14 times 14. And those are all perfect squares. Okay. So now, the last part of your homework tonight is going to be estimate between what two consecutive integers is 14.25. Okay, and this is where this chart's going to come in handy. Alright, I'm going to find where would the square root of 14.25 land. It would probably land somewhere between the 9 and the 16. So it's right here, 14.25. I don't have a calculator. It doesn't want me to use a calculator. It wants me to estimate, give a guess. So it is between, so we have the square root of 9, we have 14.52, and then we also have the square root of 16. It lies between here. It's bigger than the square root of 9, but it's less than the square root of 16. So what's the square root of 9? 3. What's the square root of 16 is 4. So it lies between, it's going to be bigger than, greater than 3, but less than 4. So that's our answer. Okay, now I'm going to do 105. So where does 105 lie on our perfect square chart? And it's going to be somewhere between 100 and 121. So that's going to be the square root of 105. That's where it's going to be. So it's between 100 and 121. That's where 105, the square root of 105 lands. So it's going to be greater than the square root of 100, but less than the square root of 121. So it's going to, what integers do they lie between? It's going to lie between 10. It's going to be greater than 10, but less than 11. And that's estimating between which two consecutive integers is 105. Okay, so that's the lesson.